we've actually done. So looks like, oh, we had moved everything over to a lists page because we wanted to manage multiple lists. So if I go in here, that's not going to work. But if I go to list by itself, that should show me all the lists. Yeah, it's kind of ugly to do that. So let me change that just for the input down here. For adding lists, we probably want to do something like label as new list name, something like that. That makes it look a little bit better. Or it should. Yeah, there we go. So my list, and then we can come back up here, do stuff, get paid, right? And delete stuff. We can delete the list. Everything works. All right. So a problem with this, let's see if I've got list one, list two. It might be nice if I didn't have to put all this on one screen, right? So right now, this is all kind of chunked in there. And if I tried to build something that went to a different screen, that would be a problem because all of my list information is kind of stored here in the state on my list page. So I'm gonna elevate this a level, and we'll do a couple of different ways of doing that. I don't know if we'll get all the way to Redux today, but we'll get started. So what I'd really like to do, and I won't be able to do it, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to come in here and do something like list state manager, something like that. And actually, maybe not. Maybe that's not the right way to do it. Maybe do something like, take my list state from my list page. Let's see, how do I do this? I can't remember how to open up Split over there. Okay.
Sorry.
Whatever.
One question I have is, I don't remember the relationship between the list page and the lists page.
There is not a relationship at this point. So lists page doesn't work, or sorry, list page doesn't work. That was the idea, was going to be to have a separate, or like maybe a detail page. So wish that didn't open it that way. Okay, well, here. That I know how to do. Okay, sorry, my Vim was not working with me too much. So what might make sense would be to do something like take my state here and copy it up here. And then maybe if there was some way for me to pass down the state and set state, state equals state and set state is set state. Actually, I don't need it. I don't actually need that for the home page, but I do need it for the list or lists page. I have no idea what I just did. Okay, well, anyway, it would be nice. I can't actually do it, but state equals state, set state equals set state. So that's one possibility. It's kind of ugly because a lot of, like the state management, it kind of feels like maybe keeping the state together with the actions that modify it might be nice. So the other option would be maybe if I could pass down all the props to those components, but the router doesn't actually make it easy for me to do that. So I can't just pass arbitrary properties here to the route that would get then passed on to the page component. So what I'm going to do is show you a different way to do that. And it's going to be using something called context. So I guess my first step is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create, let's just call it the list state JS. It's going to be a component. I got to import React. I'm going to use state here as well, at least for now. And default function list state. And the main thing that this is going to have is children. Because children, again, is just that those things that are part of our, that are embedded within this component. So we're going to do, this is a little trick. Oh, sorry, I should actually return that. I'll just do this all in one line. This syntax, just like open and close tag right there, is a way for me to have a React fragment. So normally React wants you to send back something that's a real HTML node, but there's a shorthand for doing it like this. And this is not a full HTML node, but it kind of works like one. That is actually shorthand for saying return react.fragment, and then the children, and then close react.fragment, but they realized that nobody wants to type react.fragment, so they gave you the shorthand. All right.
So what is a fragment exactly?
A fragment is kind of like a fake node or a fake component that wraps everything else. So normally our components have to return something that looks like an HTML node, right? So
right.
Like a div,
I know
or
that it has
like
to
that.
be in a single, yeah, it has to return a single, I guess, node. Is that the right?
Right. And if you don't want to do that, if you'd rather return something that might have a single node, it might have lots of nodes, it might be whatever, then you can put that in a fragment. And that's just React. It's your way of saying, React, please think of this as one thing, even though it's not.
Okay.
So,
is it the same as just putting it in a div with no classes?
Well, the difference is a div is actually a layout object. So it actually shows up in your HTML that gets generated. This doesn't show up in your HTML.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, so what I guess I'll do first of all is, let me switch over to I'll go to my app here. And I'm going to import, not improt, my list state from, and this will be components list state, right? And I'm just going to wrap this here. Okay, so this doesn't do it. This shouldn't do anything to my application, because all that I've done is I've kind of introduced this fake level of nesting. It's not really doing anything, right? But now what I want to do is actually, let's see if I can remember how to do this. I'm going to create this thing called a context object. So actually, can I just do, I forget how to do that. It's react.create context. So I guess I can just say create context here. And I don't think that I give that any, I mean, I can give it a default value. So I could do, just start it off with maybe an empty. Actually, I'll just start it off with null, because what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create a provider here. So I introduced this fake level of nesting. Now I'm going to actually do something with it. So let's see, this would just be, I'm going to make this a list context dot provider, and then make, list context dot provider. And what this allows me to do is it's a magical way to pass props down to everything contained like at a lower level of nesting. And we can think of it as magic for right now. It's also you could kind of think of it as kind of a global thing. I don't know, but I'm just going to make this be my context. I'm just going to do that, right? And so what this does is it says that if anybody later on uses a context consumer, then they'll be able to extract out this value, no matter how deeply they're nested within children. So I don't have to pass these props explicitly anymore. It's almost like I'm passing some implicit props. So let's see, if I save this, I think it should still work. And I'll look at my help or my, yeah. So we can look at the components here. And you see there's actually these other providers, context provider things. These will show up at different places. We won't worry too much about them, but here you see this context provider has a value of my context. Okay, so to actually use this, now what I'm going to do is go into my lists page, and I'm just going to put something on the lists page to indicate that it's consuming the context. So in order to get the context, what I really want to do is use a hook. So let me see if I can remind myself how to do this, because this is something I don't do. It's like something you'll do once for an application, and then maybe you wouldn't do it after that. So, whoops, I'm in the wrong window there. Yeah. Right, okay. So I'm gonna actually do one other thing here, and I'm gonna say const use list state is going to be a function, and it is going to return, well, actually, I'll just make this, why not just make it a real function? Don't use this. And what it's going to do is it's going to say const result equals use context of list context. And it's going to return that result. So what this is a way for me to do is basically taking this context object, which is a global thing. It says find the nearest nested one in my nesting of components. Does that kind of make sense? So this is a way for it to kind of search back through parent to grandparent to great grandparent until it can finally find something that is providing this list context. It's kind of like skipping levels of the nesting. And then in here, I can say import use list state from components list context. And I'll just go ahead and do this. Const the context. And I'll just use the list state. Okay, everybody kind of with me so far as to what we're trying to do here? Trying to provide some value that skips levels of nesting. And then when we want to use it, I'll just come down here and I'll say pre, and then just whatever the context is, I'm going to put it in the page as part of a pre-formatted block. And it failed because I don't have something called list context. It's called list state. So and I should put the word export. I should get into insert mode before I do that. I did it again. And I use Vim because I never make mistakes in it, right? Yeah, not so much. Also need to use context there. Okay, so, and I think I forgot one other thing here, which was, I don't think you can use the context. Let's see, what is the context? The context.value, I think, is what I actually want. Nope. Okay, now why is this not? Oh, because I need to actually provide a value here. Somehow I lost that. Ma context. It's still not showing it. Let's see now. Don't want the at bar there. Let me put that in an H1 instead. Well, let's just put an H1 with a pre. Okay, so something's there, it's just not visible. I think maybe I just need to change this and it's not actually the value. try that. Ah, my context has appeared. So fantastic. Probably don't need the H1 here. Okay. So I got my context. All right, so we can do something more complicated here. We could do, rather than passing down just a string, we could actually pass down the lists state. So I could actually come in here and say, well, let's go ahead and grab, create the state here. And I'm going to pass down a state and a set state. This might, yeah, that does actually kind of work. So the state is showing up there. The set state's a function, so it doesn't get JSONified very well. But now I'm passing, and now if you kind of look at my nesting, it's actually skipping a lot, right? It's skipping the router's provider, router history. It's got a switch. It's got a lists page, all of that jazz. But the lists page is where it's actually consuming it. So I can actually come in here, delete that. And instead of the context here, I'm going to say, this is going to be state and set state. And that doesn't work because it's no longer the context, right? So I don't need that anymore. Okay. And apparently, oh, right. So when I'm actually creating it, I'm actually sending back something called state and something called set state. So I don't want this to be a list anymore. I want this to be an object. Okay, so list 1, list 2. Okay, so that's kind of cool. What I can also do is I can actually take some of these actions here and I could move them into the context provider, or the list state right here. So I'll take I'll just take all of them. And now the value that I'm going to be passing, this syntax, by the way, this just means create a new object with the key of state and set state, those two keys. So I'm going to change the object that gets passed, and I'm going to pass add item, add list. Was it del list? Yeah, delete list. Okay, spelled it out. Add item, delete item, right? So those are the things that are going to be in that context object that gets passed down. And so now what I really want is to change this, and actually I'll probably still want to pass down state, so I'll go ahead and leave that as well. That should cause problems because I haven't, well, right. Add list should take a list name here. That is one thing. And let's just not even worry about clearing that out because don't worry about it. And then here we will say import FP from Lodash FP. That should at least fix some of those. And then I don't have an event anymore. So I don't need to prevent default. Okay. So this is probably not going to quite work because here, this add list, I'm going to have to do a little wrapper here. Actually, I'll make this a const. And that takes an event. And what it's going to do is pass that, or it's going to, first of all, prevent default, since that's a submit. And then we want to call the context.addList on ev.target.value. Okay, so and here, I'm going to call this context just to make it pretty clear. Oh, and one other thing I want to do here is I wanted to clear out, oh, and sorry, this add list, I need to pass the list name into that. Okay, so we need context.state there. And we got delete list, add item, and delete item. So just gonna make it explicit here that we're calling these things in the context. Oops. And now this should actually work. My list, my second list, and I can delete them. All right, so basically what we've done here is we've taken all of the state and most of the actions that are modifying that state and moved it out of this component. So this is now pretty much just a presentation component, right? It's got a little tiny bit of behavior that happens right here when you add a list, just because that happens to be on a submit. So it makes sure that you get the submit, it's shown in the proper way. It doesn't try to refresh your page or anything like that. All right, so now what I'd like to do is going to actually have list one here. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to make this a clickable link so I could navigate to a list page. All right, so the way that I can do that is I can actually change this to-do list thing here. Actually, maybe I can just do this as a list. No, I'll make this a, I'm gonna come up here and do, okay. Maybe I'll call this a list of lists. And yeah, why not just have everything pull in the context as necessary? So what I want to return here is going to be a list. Yeah, a list with list items inside it. Oops. So and I don't really need the well, I guess I will need the lists themselves because I'm going to want, actually no, let's go ahead and go with this. I was going to say that I don't really need to have the whole list object, but well, I'll show you what I'm going to do here. So I'll go ahead and get the, just grab the state only out of the list state here. And yeah, I could pass this down as a prop if I wanted to, but I'm just going to try to use context like crazy. And then here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an fp.map of, and what I actually want is a list ID is going to be a list entry, sorry. List ID equals list ID. I should also do a key here, just because React likes it if you do keys. And I'm going to map that, actually, I can do a comma there, over state.listIDs. And then for my list entry, I'll just return a, for now, I'll just keep it really simple, list item text primary equals list. Actually, let's do this as a template here. List, and this is going to be list ID. And we do need list ID to come in as a prop. There. So let's see what this looks like. It's probably got mistakes. Right. If you're ever going to do, so this syntax right here, I don't know that we've talked about that. This is a JavaScript template. It's kind of like an F string in Python. So you can do substitutions of JavaScript expressions. And the way that you do that is you do this $sign in the curly braces there. But if I'm going to be passing that as part of, kind of an attribute value here, I'm going to have to actually tell React, this is JavaScript now that we're talking about, not just HTML. So I put that there, and that should fix that. And I have an import. Oh, wait, what is going on? Lists page. Oh, this is a nesting problem because it's telling me that it can only occur at the top level, and that's because I forgot that closing right there. And so now we've got some things that need to be pulled in from Material UI. Okay, so, and I guess I need the list of lists actually to be shown. Let's go ahead and put that here. And that didn't take any arguments. So now if I say list one, that's that list ID, list two, whoops, that's an item. So you can see those IDs that are being assigned, which are just random numbers. So what I'd really like to do on my list entries here is I would like to get the name of the list. So I can do that here by just extracting it out of the state. Or extracting the list object out of the state. And so what I'll do here is I'll just say state dot, I forget what the state object looks like. It's just objects. And so maybe I can say list.name. I don't know, will that work? Oh, looks like it worked. Cool. So I can pull out the attributes that I'm interested in from the state in this way, right? So now what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and just use the list name here as that attribute. And I also want to make this a, is it just a button? It's not really, button is not really where I want it to be, but actually, maybe if I just jump down to the API, look at the list API. Oh, sorry, it's list item that I'm interested in. Yeah, so if I put button, it makes it into a button. So that in and of itself will make it look a little bit prettier. Okay, so it's a button now. And then I want to give it an on click. And for this, I'd actually like it to navigate. So history.push, and I'm going to make this the URL for, I don't remember all that stuff. So let's look at, whoops, let's look at the routes. List. And we want to pass list ID as a parameter to that. And now I close that, and I should be good. But I've got to get access to the URL for. We put that up there. Okay. And history as well. So then the router. Oh no, it's in routes. And I should make that a slash because we're not doing Python. Okay. That wasn't supposed to happen. Okay. Let's see what's going on here. Oh, right. My onClick. You have to make onClick a function, which you can do by doing that. What I was actually doing is every time it rendered, it was trying to jump over to the list page, which was a mistake because it was calling that function. Okay, let's see about this. It's better. And let's see if this goes to the right page. No, it's list : list ID. Let's see about that. It's been a while since we've done these routes. Oh, list ID is one word. Well, that won't fix anything, but here we go. This page. Okay. It's now going to the right list ID page because this is our URL, but it's going to there. Right? So this page doesn't work though. We don't even have it hooked up anymore. So let's go ahead and hook it up. And hopefully we'll get a nice big error here. No, because oh, right, we won't get an error because list page doesn't know about all of our context stuff that we're doing now. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab the list state there. And we're not going to have any of that stuff. Right? What we will have is using the list state. And we're also going to do another thing here, which is the, we're going to use some, you could directly use some props here. I prefer not using the props from the router that will tell us what those match parameters are. So React router DOM hooks. So what we actually want is use params. Well, that was an unfortunate link there. Maybe I just need to wait for the whole page to be loaded before clicking. Nope, still no good. So we'll just scroll down. So it returns an object of key value pairs of the URL parameters. All right, so I can come in here and I can say import use params from React router DOM. And use params. And so now what I want to do is figure out what the list is that I'm interested in. Let's just, actually for now, let's just do a some pre-formatted JSONification. Or stringification, maybe I should call it. So let's just look at context first. And we'll eventually have a to-do list there, but let's save that for later. And I need to close, yeah, there we go. So this one has no list ID, so downside to this is I've got to, okay, so now there's some list IDs, and then we've got the objects there. The objects have names and item IDs. So what I actually need is a list. Is it a list of items? I think so. Yeah, I need a list of items. So what I can do is I can say const list is equal to the context.objects params dot list ID. That might work. I'm not really sure. So let's just see about, we'll go ahead and go for context and list as we stringify these things. Oh, and then I think I can do something like that to make it. Okay, let's go back, not that far. Create a list, click onto it, and we got a problem. It's context.objects is not defined. So maybe it's better for me to just console.log it. And this is getting to be irritating enough that I want to see my list state. Okay, so let me say my list IDs. Let me go ahead and create one here. Foo, and foo has item IDs is an empty list. So let's go back to our list of lists. Okay, so foo also has to have a name. My foo list. Okay, so now at least I can, my refresh isn't going to make everything go crazy again. So oh, that's not the comment character there. Okay, let's just see what the context is. See what I'm doing wrong here. It's context.state.objects. That's my problem. Okay. And I guess what I'd like to, sorry. One of the things that might be nice here is to change the title from the list page to say list.name. Okay, so we're getting the correct list name. And then we've also got this to-do list thing that's supposed to be showing up here. So let's see how we were doing that there. It was just the items. So here. Items is going to be list items, which we actually have to look up. OnAdd is going to be context.onAdd, or sorry, context.add item. No, or is it going to be, it's going to be more complicated than that. So I'll just make this OnAdd, because we're going to have to translate some things. And on delete is going to also be on delete. I mean, I guess I could do some of those translations automatically there. Anyway, so list items, we're going to have to do that here by looking up all of the items, all of the item IDs in the list. Actually, and this is going to be context.state.objects, the IID, which just stands for item ID there, right? And we haven't done the OnAdd and onDelete. So it's some value becomes context.add item of the params. Well, I can just do, well, I'll do params.listid and that value. On delete is some ID and its context.delete item params.listid and the value. So we need these because we need to provide the list ID in those. So that way we should have a list page that works, maybe? No. Oh, right. It was ID. So it looks like that's actually working. And now if I go back, actually the side nav needs to change. But if I actually just go back to the top level here, it refreshed my page when I did that. So it actually lost all of the state, unfortunately. So let's just go ahead and fix the state. The nav drawer here needs to go to lists. Okay, so if I go to my foo list, item 1, item 2, go back here to my list of lists, you see item 1 and item 2 are also there. We can go back and forth. The more interesting thing, I think, would be if we come back over to the lists page, we don't actually render these here. So I'm just going to remove that. And actually, just wondering if there's a way to make that look a little, well, we'll clean it up in a moment as far as the styling goes. And then on my list item entry, or my list entry, I should say, actually, let's just do this as a secondary. I'll do list of, say, list item IDs dot length items, like that. Okay, so hopefully, yeah, it's a list of 0 items. And we can click through the foo list, add an item to it, and go back, see a list of 1 items. We can't delete it. That's one thing that we probably want to do as well. So what I can do here is I can have, let's see what this looks like. It's a list item secondary action. Just copy all that. And so what on delete will do is it's going to say state dot delete list. It takes nothing as input, and it's going to call delete list on list ID. Hopefully that will work, except I've got a list item secondary action I've got to pull in here. So I've got a delete there. Can I delete it? I can't. It's not called delete list. What's it called? Oh, it's called Firefox is going to go crazy right now. Okay. Sorry, this happens sometimes. Let's see if I can just go bring it up. There we go. Okay. Delete list takes an ID. And I did oh, sorry. It's context.delete list, so that's a way that I can do that. So if we hop back over to our list, we can delete it, and everything is just working all right. So list 1, list 2. So list 1, do the thing, and we're just verifying that, it's list 1 has 1 item, list 2 has 0 items. Go back and forth. So any questions about kind of what we did or why we did it in kind of boosting the state and the actions up to a higher level there? So all kind of makes sense?
I think this is one of the ones I'm going to go over after you're done, and I'll probably have more questions later.
Okay. Well, and just to kind of go over this a little bit more, if we go to the list state object, so there's not really any presentation going on here, right? If you look at the actual JSX, this HTML looking thing that we're sending back, all that it does is it gives you the context provider. And we're trying to pass down certain things so that we don't have to kind of pass props down through multiple levels of nesting manually. It's a way for us to skip that and to clean up the code. We could have certainly built it in such a way that it does pass it through every individual layer, but it makes all of those intervening components pretty ugly. And it's really hard to do with the React router anyway. So this is still not quite as nice as we could make it. And there's one other thing. There's one other hook. Well, let me go ahead and commit this. Actually, I didn't have any file. I did. Okay. It's pretty much what we did there. Multiple. Okay, I can't spell. So multiple pages are seeing the same list, right? There's one other hook that we can use here, and I'm gonna have to look at this. Let's see. Doesn't even have it on the default one. Here we go, hooks maybe. Boom. Okay, an alternative to use state. So this is a way that we can kind of encapsulate all of our state management in one place. Don't know if we're going to finish. This is not Redux, but it's like half a step before Redux. So this is, we've made progress here by having all of these actions as their own things. But what this does is it's actually going to take every action and it's going to represent it as a JavaScript object. And all of the actual work is going to be done in a function called a reducer. And that reducer's job is to take these action objects and change the state in some way and give you a new version of the state. All right, the logic, hopefully, of that kind of makes sense. So the way that we can do that is, here I'm going to go ahead and say, use reducer.
All right, but why do we want a reducer?
So if you have this reducer, and so this is kind of a really simple reducer that he's got here. What it allows you to do is think of all of it, think in a very structured way about all the updates to your state. So it's like, I made this change, and that change is actually represented by some JavaScript object. And then I made another change, and then I made another change. So by kind of capturing all of the places where you might modify the state into one function, it allows you to kind of just centralize that.
Okay.
Hey, I got to step away for a second. I got a delivery coming.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
No problem. So the neat thing I think about the state is that later on when we, actually the context that we pass down can just have two different parts of it. It can have a state and a dispatch function. What the dispatch function does is you just dispatch these objects, which represent what you're trying to do to the state. And so rather than having an add list, add item, delete item, now you just have dispatch. right? So it's a smaller number of things that you pass. So let's see if we can do this. I don't want to go past 1. So if we are halfway through it, then that'll be just fine. So let me go ahead and try it. Okay, so there's a reducer function. So let's go ahead and write our our reducer here. Function, I'll just call it reducer. And it takes some previous state and some action object. And its job is to return a new state object, right? So an easy way, well, not an easy way, but a common way to do this is you say switch on action.type. Assume that you're always going to have some type field as part of your action. And a switch is just like an if, elif type thing in Python. So we've got this switch here. And if that action.type is, let's see, add list, we'll just use the same names that we've been using before, then what we're going to do is we're going to do all the things that add list would have done. Now this is a little, actually, let's see. Yeah, I guess we can do, yeah. So actually I'll just take, whoops. Take that code there. Okay, so there's a new list that we've created. And rather than doing a set state, we're just going to return this object where it's got list IDs are there and the objects and whatever else has been changed. Okay, so that's how we handle an add list. And then I guess we're using list name here. So we're going to have that be as part of the action. And I'm going to have a payload on my action. It's just going to be part of what I'll call it there. And then new list.id, we've got that. Okay, so that should be fine. It's a delete list. We'll take the logic of delete list here. And again, we're going to say list, list IDs is new list IDs and objects is new objects. I can't type. Okay, it's right. Oops. Changing some of these just to match the fact that everything's coming in this action object, right? Adding an item. And let's see. And delete item will be our last one there. Wait, no, that's not right. Oh yeah, that is right. And let's see if we got that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, instead of saying use state here, I'm going to do state and dispatch is a use reducer, and then that initial state. I'm not 100% confident that all of this is going to work perfectly. Let's just go ahead and make this a list instead of an object. I mean, all of this is going to break. What is going to be the first thing that breaks? Oh, right. So this should be value. This action payload value. Okay. I guess if I really want to make these like their own functions, I could do that. I think you can do this. And what this does is it just introduces a scope in case you define any variables inside one of these cases. They're local to the little block that I'm doing there. Cool. Okay, so it's not state and delete list now, it's state and dispatch. Is what I get out of use list state there. And I'm going to copy that everywhere. Actually, yeah. So let's see, our delete list. Now on delete now, it's going to actually be dispatch. Type is delete list. Payload is list ID. Right? Does that make sense? The way that we're kind of manipulating this? It's kind of a weird thing to do, just creating these objects that then some other function somewhere else is going to do something with them. But it is, it does, I don't know, one of the things that you get, like I'll just give you a hint as to what will come up, and I will not go any further here. So halfway to use reducer. When we get to Redux, Redux gives you this kind of a pattern, but it also gives you the Redux developer tools. And what the developer tools let you do is see for every action, how did the state change? And you can actually go back in time in the debugger, and you can see, oh, well, I dispatched this event and this did this problem in the state. And so you can actually look at that right here. And I don't think I've even got them installed yet. But you can see how the state changes over time. And as you know, typically what happens is you'll see, oh, well, this state transition was wrong. And so let me look at the reducer for that and see what, why did that break? What was going on here? All right, so we're, we still have to convert all of these actions to use those. And then once we're there, one of the neat things is we will be switching over to using Redux from using use reducer is a really straightforward thing to do. So Redux gives you a context provider, and it's React Redux integration. And that context provider will give you access to the use state. Actually, it's not use state, it's use, there's use selector. We'll talk about what a selector is. And there is use dispatch. And so you'll be able to get access to that dispatch at any point. You'll be able to get access also to parts of the state. So a selector is just a function which takes the state and gives you some slice of that state. So whatever's interesting to you at that moment. And there's good reasons to not have all of your code dependent on the entire state every time, because that means every time anything changes, everything that uses the state in any way has to change at that same time. So Redux gives you some ways of making that a little bit cleaner. All right. Any questions about kind of what we've covered here so far, or why, the how, the why, the what, the where? All right, so hopefully, next week we'll be able to hit some Redux, and then we'll see if we can hook this up to an API. That'll probably take at least a couple of weeks to do that, because we'll have to develop the API first of all in Flask, and that'll be a switching languages type thing and adding a new project structure. And then once we've got that API, hooking it up to the Redux store so that we can actually store the lists somewhere persistent. Right, so that it don't just keep getting reset every time we refresh the browser. And we'll have some better IDs than those ugly floating point numbers. So, all right, well, if there are no questions, hopefully this is still useful. If you've got thoughts on other directions that you'd like to go, or if anybody else has ideas as to what they would like to talk about, if you want to do a tech talk, it doesn't always have to be the Rick Show. Because Rick Show sounds like a rickshaw, and yeah, anyway. And those are the auto rickshaws are just smelly and noisy. So anyway, all right, well, I will see some of you for TCPA. Otherwise, have a good weekend.
Good.
See ya.
See you.